Well, thanks so much for joining me in thinking about Psalm 8. And I'm doing just Psalm 8 for a reason. I think it's more important to talk about what we find in that psalm than it is, for instance, about divorce. And I've included in this YouTube talk a text of a free translation. My translation from the Hebrew. It's very free, very dynamic, and I've taken a lot of liberties for particular reasons. And if you want to follow that, I'm going to talk just a bit about that translation and the text. And by the way, if you're about ready to click off after just seeing me, let me give you a quick summary and then you can go on your way. This psalm begins with a kind of praise of God in very, very elegant poetic language and ends with the same phrase. So it's kind of a book-ended thing. And then in the core of the psalm, we begin with a kind of poetic description of what that powerful God is like, but quickly switches to talk about the place of humankind in the cosmos and ends with a really heavy pronouncement of both honor and obligation. In fact, we could say that this core of this psalm has two sides to it. One is unspoken, but the spoken side is the dignity and power entrusted to humankind in the creation. The side that's not spoken, but implied very plainly, is the responsibility that implies. And I say implied because I'm saying it's not explicitly in the text, but it's there, clearly there. And by the way, I said poetic. Let's be clear. This is a poetic attempt to describe God and the human condition. It's not scientific. And therefore, we are asked to invite our imaginations along with this. And therefore, we're encouraged with the kind of freedom that I took in translation. Well, as I said, let's get back to the content of the psalm. It begins with this marvelous paean of joyful recognition of the majesty of God. And it's the name of God. And let's remember that the name is the person in this Hebrew way of thinking. So that's not odd. It's actually very, very much a part of the culture we're talking about. And then there's a brief statement about infants and those who are nurslings. And those two phrases, by the way, are not used often in the Old Testament. This idea of babes and nurslings, those two are put together mainly in violent contexts where they are slaughtered. And that's, if you don't know this background, then those words just simply fly by. But what is being said is that all it takes is the innocent breath of the most vulnerable to set forth this marvelous power of God. And then quickly talks about what the situation of humankind is. And it is a passage that has bewildered some more fundamentalist or literalist because it could actually suggest that human beings are gods. But as I've translated, it's pretty plain that it's just simply saying, amidst all of the created beings that surround God, these divine beings, angels and those who are described as watchers and so forth, even given their powers, humankind almost have that kind of power. But even more, they're crowned with glory. They are a marvelous, marvelous entity in this world. And as a result, they are given huge, huge powers over all that is. Now, as I said earlier on, what is implied is that if you have this glorious position in the total realm of things, then it doesn't take a leap to understand that that implies huge responsibility. And it's very clear that there couldn't be much more relevant right now, given the growing recognition that we have not imitated God. Remember, in this psalm, God is spoken of as one who amazingly is mindful and caring about humankind. It's a subtle suggestion that if that is the case, then that which has been cared for also be caring. That is to say, we're being called to imitate what is poetically being described to God. That is mindfulness and care of that which we have at our fingertips, the power to change the conditions of all living things, and of rivers and mountains and streams, and in fact, now, the outer space. That is becoming a recognition, and it is matched with the growing recognition that we have not imitated God in our mindfulness and care, but in fact have thrown that great glorious power granted to us in the face of God. So we're being called to be honest about this. And if you're lucky enough to be preaching about this on Sunday, I encourage you to take a shot at it. Well, I've had a good time this week living with the text in that Hebrew Bible right there. And I don't know what the text is going to be next week I'm going to be looking at, but I sure am looking forward to my time with it and then my time with you. Take care. And thanks for tuning in.